And I strongly respect, just personally, what's been done with respect to the establishment of this agricultural reserve. A major initiative in the public interest, approved by the people. People were willing to dip big time into their own pockets to preserve agriculture in this agriculture reserve. But what you are doing, and let me just say, I made that reference to Sarasota County to point out that there, the law is interpreted the way I'm interpreting it, because whether it's publicly initiated or privately initiated rezonings, that map appears. And there must be a reason for that. And I'm suggesting to you, because the statute requires it, but that's for a later forum to determine. But on the substance of what's before you, the agricultural reserve was there to preserve agriculture. That's why this was done. Now it's becoming a vehicle for extensive development, and your code sanctioned that. That was perhaps some compromise with the development interests that occurred. But it's how it's done that's important. And what you're taking here is 264 acres of unified prime farmland and swapping it out for scores of slivers of land. You know, I mean, Commissioner, you laugh at that, but these are, in fact...
we're going to have order, so you do not address anyone individually on this council, so please keep to the subject.
Very good. But, in fact, it is laughable what this developer is doing. It'd be laughable if it wasn't so serious. This is the slicing and dicing of the agricultural reserve. And the applicant suggests that these are people... You know, it's said that these are just slices, but this is property by people who have life investments. Okay, anybody that owns substantial property, or even a small property, depending on your means, it's their major life investments. That's immaterial to the issue of whether or not you're getting comparable value or greater value. And he says there is no qualitative standard in the code with respect to what is being preserved. I mean, my gosh, if you all as commissioners don't look at quality in terms of what's being proposed to be preserved, are you really doing your jobs? You know, what serves the public interest here? You know, it's suggested the number one thing the public gets, the applicant says, in return for approving these rezonings is a bigger new development. You know, that's what the applicant gets. And maybe there's some taxes that come from new development, but this agricultural reserve is supposed to be about preserving agriculture and about the value to the community. I mean, this is the prime agricultural land within Palm Beach County. The quality of the soils, the quality of what can be grown here is prime. But you're taking a huge parcel that is ideal for that and swapping it out with all these little slivers. And it's part of a pattern. And we've seen it here before with this applicant. And you're going to see it again, coming in, taking areas that are proposed to be preserved here that aren't just little slices, and coming in and saying, let's develop that next. And maybe that will intrude more into the preserve, even more than this does. And, you know, it's being done for their benefit. But I would suggest to you that you're not elected by the development industry. Let's hope that's not the case. You're elected by the people, to represent the people, to do what's best for the public interest, not just to repeatedly accede to the interests of a well-connected developer. And here there can be no argument that this advances the public interest. There are, and with respect to the advertising issue, I'll be very interested in what comes back on that, because the case law is clear that if you don't comply with advertising requirements strictly, then the ordinance is void. So just understand the consequences with respect to moving forward in that scenario. There are standards for approval in your Unified Land Development Code, Article 2, Chapter B, Sections 1B and 2B. very specific standards that are set out. And it's disappointing that I don't see this proceeding going forward in terms of making factual findings with respect to each of these standards, because I would suggest to you that's what the law requires. And we have not seen that. You know, we saw staff's presentation, we saw applicant's presentation, and a complete disregard to going down this list and making findings of fact to support the approval of this application, or these applications. You know, one of the grounds for an appeal to the circuit court is the absence of competent substantial evidence to support an essential finding of fact. But we're not seeing that here. You know, it's like the applicant presumes he's got the votes and doesn't have to go through the exercise of doing what your code requires. Let's hope that's not the case. Let's hope each of you have an open mind as to whether this should be approved or not, based on these standards. Now, the first two standards require consistency with the comprehensive plan and consistency with the code. Comprehensive Plan Policy 1.5.1b requires that the developed areas, quote, be compact, contiguous, and arranged as a unified whole and appropriately buffered so as not to interfere with the continued or future functioning of the protected area. For this purpose, a meandering or intrusion of the development area into the protected area would only be considered in an equestrian community. There's no evidence that this would be a pedestrian community. Yet you have very clearly, and I noticed here there's no Elmo or any way for me to project anything up. Is it possible to ask staff to put up page 232 so we can share the map with respect to this?
What are you referring to?
I'm referring to the zoning map, Palm Beach County, Planning Division, Site Location and Zoning, Valencia Cove, AGR, PUD. This map.
Is the Valencia Cove staff report, page 232?
Right. If it can't be projected, I don't
Can we
want
put
to
that
take
up?
minutes of my time discussing if it can
We'll
be.
continue talking as we put that
I think
up
this
for
makes
you.
the point pretty compellingly as to the violation of this.
To kind of speed things up when he's done speaking, let him do any crossing.
Is that counting down my 15 minutes? Okay, unless it can come up quickly.
Maybe we could stop the clock until they're, no, and they can't stop the clock?
Okay, let me just move on, and if it's coming up, you'll see it. But clearly here, what you've got in terms of the development is it intruding into this new preserved area. There's no compactness, contiguity, and the kind of things your code requires. This is new preserved area that's snaking around in these little slivers, I'll use the word again, around the development area. So you've clearly got this development area intruding in to this preserved area. That's explicitly prohibited by the comprehensive plan. Also, Objective 1.5 of the comprehensive plan states the objective of the Agricultural Reserve District is, quote, to preserve the unique farmland and wetlands in order to preserve and enhance agricultural activity, environmental and water resources, and open space within the agricultural reserve tier. There's your qualitative standard. And this is being violated by swapping out a large, unified, prime farmland area for these little inconsequential slivers. Now here's one. Unified Land Development Code Article 3, Chapter E, 2F, 4C requires that each developed area be contiguous. The Valencia Cove parcel, and I'm glad it's up now, look at Preserve 39. It splits the developed area with this narrow preserved space. That's not a method of preservation allowed by your code. And it specifically keeps that developed area, Valencia Cove, from being contiguous. And nobody can debate this. You violate your code if you approve this. The applications seek to rescind easements granted to the public. And there's language about it being in perpetuity. And apparently that is something that can be ignored. In perpetuity means until the developer decides they can make a bigger buck by making it no longer in perpetuity. It should mean something. Compatibility with surrounding uses. Policy 1.B.1-B.3 of the Comprehensive Plan requires a buffer between non-agricultural uses and adjacent agricultural uses, to ensure that the new non-agricultural uses do not adversely affect agricultural uses. The southern border of the proposed development area of Valencia Cove shares a boundary with lands owned by Palm Beach County preserved for agriculture. There's no provision in the application for buffering the proposed development area from the existing agriculture. This places 586 homes in the parcel directly adjacent to the farming operations currently in operation on county-owned lands. So that is clearly violated as well. I would suggest to you that under Standard 5, this is not a logical pattern. Number 7, there are demonstrated changed conditions or circumstances that necessitate the amendment. I haven't heard anything from the testimony so far that talks about demonstrated changed conditions or circumstances that make this necessary for the county. Okay, the only thing of necessity that's been demonstrated here is, I use the word greed, some greed on the part of the developer, and I respect that. I'm a capitalist. I own a business. But a desire on the part of the applicant to make more money. That's not the demonstrated changed conditions or circumstances contemplated by this. This practice of swapping large parcels for small parcels do not reflect a change in condition, but just simply a strategy by the developer whereby it can preserve a larger parcel to get public support for a project, later swap it out for smaller parcels, and build out what the public properly thought was protected. This practice is duplicitous and against the policy and interests of the citizens of the county. Mr. Radley, is Valencia Cove, as proposed, an agricultural area or a developed area?
Which portion of Valencia Cove are you referring to, the addition or the existing approved project?
Speaking to Valencia Cove. Is that
the north portion of Valencia Cove?
How about this both?
Well, the north portion of Valencia Cove is under active development and construction. The south portion of Valencia Cove, which is the addition here today, is under active row crop production.
So the south portion is an addition to the developed area?
That is correct.
Preserve 39, you're very familiar with the maps. We had it up there. That's that narrow strip that divides Valencia Cove. I saw the graphic that you put up there and was a little bit startled by the tag that you gave it. Let me ask you, what is the proposed use of Preserve 39?
Gladys, can you put up number 39? Oh, is that the Flavor Pict? Is that the Flavor Pict right away? Preserve number 39 of Valencia Cove is Flavor Pict Road right-of-way. Future Flavor Pict Road right-of-way. Road doesn't exist. It's on the county's thoroughfare plan. That property was dedicated to Palm Beach County as a requirement of development order approval.
Again, what is the proposed use of Preserve 39?
Well, if the county decides to build Flavor Pict Road, it would be Flavor Pict Road.
Is it your plan that it be Flavor Pict Road?
It's not my plan. I don't own it. It's Palm Beach County's plan.
So Preserve 39 is very potentially a road. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Finally, then, with regard to what we've been calling, what the public's been calling the slices, you referred to 44 preserve areas attributable to this project. Is that correct?
For Valencia Cove, that is correct.
For Valencia Cove. And with regard to your proposal as a whole, how many different preserve areas are there?
For Valencia Cove, there are 44.
And how many new preserve areas are you proposing with these 3 applications?
Could I give you the total acreage, or do you want each one individually?
What's the number, the total number?
The total acreage is 134.281 acres.
And how many parcels? How many different preserve areas? Not parcels. How many different preserve areas?
Yeah. This is why I love Gladys so much. Valencia Cove is 14 new.
And not limiting your answer to Valencia Cove, but in terms of the 3 applications that are before us, how many preserve areas are being established in return for the decommissioning of the Amistoy property?
If you know.
The question and answer is there are 44 preserve parcels attributable to the Valencia Cove development order that's before the board.
How many new ones does the county get in response to no longer developing the Amistoy property?
14.
So as to the 44 preserve areas, you said there are, quote, a lot of nursery operators.
Excuse me,
Quantify.
14 plus 5, 19.
I'm sorry.
19 total, not 14 total.
Parcels? New parcels?
New parcels.
Okay. In terms of the 44 preserve areas attributable to this project, you said there are a lot of nursery operators. How many nurseries are being, because, I mean, a lot is a very vague term. How many nurseries are within those areas proposed to be preserved?
31 of 44.
What's that?
31 of 44.
31 nurseries. How many home sites?
On the nurseries?
No, how many home sites within those parcels, within those preserve areas?
They cannot have a home site on the preserve parcels. It's
No.
prohibited by code.
Today, before there are preserve areas.
Don't know.
You don't know how many home sites there are? There are some home sites, though, aren't there?
Most of the dwellings that are on the preservation parcels are former residential structures which have been converted into nursery operation, the business component of the nursery operation. As to how many of those, I don't know.
How many of those parcels are now being used as farmland?
Preserve number 7.
It's not readily available to say it's not readily available.
Yeah, it's not readily available, but, you know.
And did Mr. Edery testify regarding that? So if he didn't, it's beyond the scope of his testimony.
I didn't testify as to the number.
He was characterizing the nature of these parcels. I'm trying to get more specifics with respect to that.
And he continues to characterize and be general in the response as he was in his direct testimony. And if it's not within the scope of direct, I agree with Mr. Banks. Let's move on to something that was actually testified to by the witness.
The witness sought to characterize these preserve areas with respect to their current uses, and I'm seeking to get more detailed information than his very broad general characterizations that were in the record previously. I think that's within the scope.
I'm going to object to the line of questioning on the basis that preserved parcels that are not, there's no qualitative difference under the code and under the comprehensive plan with reserve to any type of parcel that would qualify as a preserved parcel. And therefore, this, under your rules, would give rise to a relevancy objection.
And I would suggest to you that the comprehensive plan does say this preserve area is to be primarily for agricultural uses, so it is relevant.
You've asked the question. Mr. Edery has answered it to the best of his ability. You need to move on.
Well, I object. He started to answer it, and then it was cut off by his attorney.
As I reminded you before, this is not a court of law. You need to move on and finish.
I think I have a right to respond.
No, sir, you do not. You have a right to cross-examine. This is not a court of law. We are going to move forward, ask your questions, get the answers. If you don't like what you get, then that's...
I asked a question, and the witness started to answer and was cut off by his attorney. I would like to have a completion of that answer. The question being, on that same subject of the character of the new preserve areas, how much of how many of those preserve areas are now farmland? I started to answer, and his attorney cut him off.
I would have to research that. I don't know off the top of my head, sir.
Okay, that's your answer.